Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Teaching Health Economics session on developing context-relevant health economics case studies and related active learning material. So my name is Heather Brown, and I'm co-leading this with Guy McIntyre. And this is part of the Teaching Health Economics capacity building workshop. So the Teaching Health Economics is a special interest group in IHEA, and we bring together health economic educators to strengthen capacity, promote quality health economic training, and share teaching resources and best practice, as well as helping to facilitate the development of new material, as well as research in health economics teaching, we presented at the Congress. So in this so I think that is it for the introduction, and then now moving on to the material. So just to give a brief summary of what active learning is. So basically it's when students participate and engage in the learning process. So it's not just you lecturing them, it's students actively in kind of participating in the material. And it uses and applying knowledge. So I guess in many cases, health economics is quite an applied discipline. So it's using examples from the real world to help students achieve learning by showing, I guess, theory and practice. And today we're going to be focusing on case simulations and games. Okay, sorry, next slide. So why use case studies? So it helps students to understand key concepts by using real world examples, and particularly if you're looking at several theories, that by using a case study, it can help show how they're all interrelated. And it also helps develop practical skills. So in many cases, students might understand the theory, but then it's difficult for them to actually apply it. So this is a good way to have them test those skills. And it as well promotes analytical thinking and interpretation, as well as helping to foster dialogues and sense of community within students, because usually these type of case studies are done in groups, so students can then collaborate with each other and draw upon each all of their experiences, and as well allow in-depth exploration of ideas and views. So there's many different ways that you can do this. So you can have a short case study, sort of at the end of a lecture, which could be less than 30 minutes. You could have a long one that lasts kind of a whole session or goes over multiple days or weeks or even the whole length of the course. Sorry, if everyone can make sure that they're on mute, please. Okay, and usually that there is no preparation required by learners, so they don't need to have reading background material or other preparation. And there's different ways that you could do case studies. So you could have a role play. So for example, you could say that suppose you're the Minister of Health or someone in policymaking. You could have a different type of game. You could have a problem-solving scenario, or you could even include things where people have to kind of fill out different spreadsheets. So it's really, there's many different ways that you so how to kind of develop your own case studies is you can use your imagination. And on the IHEA teaching repository, which I will show, that there is ideas for case studies, so you can use what other people have done and adapt it to your context. But just make sure if you do that, that you properly acknowledge where the original idea came from, so you can develop your own ideas. But the key thing is to always start from the learning outcome. So what do you want students to achieve? So when you're developing a case study or using an existing one, think about what is the outcome that you want to receive from that. And at the end of the case study, what do you want learners to be able to do? So what do you say after the case study, the skills that they will have? And I think now I'm passing over to Di.
Great, thanks, Heather. So it's very difficult, you know, we can't just give a recipe for this is how you do a case study, apart from saying you should really start from what the learning outcomes are. It's very difficult to say you need to do X, Y, Z in order to come up with case studies. So we decided that what we would do is give you a whirlwind tour of some examples of case studies, different exercises, games, etc., etc. And to mention to you that there are several resources where you can find examples of case studies that you can either use or adapt or change, develop, but that can stimulate ideas for you to develop your own. So I'm going to show you the teaching materials repository and the YouTube channel, but also to mention that there is a handbook which was developed by members of the Teaching Health Economics SIG that has some incredibly detailed information and case studies in them. And there's also some textbooks that would show you, they have little case studies or exercises at the end of chapters. So I wanted to show you the, and I'm just going to try and reduce that, the teaching materials repository. If you go to the IHEA website and you click on the teaching materials repository button at the top, you'll come to this web page. And essentially there are two parts to it. The one is contributing materials, and we really encourage people to share teaching materials that they've got. So it's very easy to upload files. It's very straightforward. Or the using the material side of things. And that's how you get into the repository itself, just clicking on this little button down here. And here you will find all the materials that have been uploaded, that people have said they're willing to share. And you can search through, you can order in terms of the title or the health economics topic, the type of material, etc., etc. But you can also search. So you'll find a list of all the topics that there are teaching materials on here, and you can search by that. You can search by language. We do have a few French and Spanish materials there, but most of them are English at the moment. We'd like to expand that into other languages. But type of material, and here if you click on case studies and group exercises, there you'll find a whole list of all the case studies and group exercises that are on in the repository at the moment. I really encourage you to go and have a look. You can just download them very easily there. The other thing I wanted to show you was the IHEA YouTube channel. And there's links to the channel on the website, but also in our newsletters. And you'll see that there's one playlist with all the recordings from the Teaching Health Economics SIG, all the teaching related skills recordings are there. But I also wanted to point out the Boston pre-Congress sessions, because these are sessions where there were recordings of an entire day-long session with various people presenting issues around health economics teaching. And I'm going to refer to two, the one by Michael Honi and Jennifer Kahn in the presentation. So I'm going to now, sorry, I'm doing a slight multimedia, I'm trying to do a slight multimedia presentation here. I just wanted to play you a snippet out of Jennifer Kahn's presentation in the Boston pre-Congress session, by way of introducing one of the games that Jennifer has developed around health insurance. And this clip just really explains why Jennifer developed the game.
Oh, Di, the volume's not playing. Sorry, Di, I can't hear the video. Sorry, Di, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. So I gathered the sound wasn't coming through.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I'm just going to talk to and suggest that you watch the video by Jennifer Conn later. But essentially, she was explaining that, you know, even that the game is to help people learn, understand concepts, that there's so many different concepts and there's so much jargon in relation to health insurance, you know, around moral hazard, adverse selection, risk versus community rating, that she developed this game. And students, the learners in the class, some of them will be classified as insurers, and some of them will be consumers or customers. Those that are customers will each get a card handed to them, and on it, it will have a number from 1 to 6, and that indicates your health status or your risk of getting ill. And you roll a dice in the game, and if a number comes up of, say, 2, then all of those who have that 2 or 1 gives it, so that they would fall ill in terms of the game. And what the insurers have to do is they have to work out how to set the premium, and the consumers decide essentially if they want to buy insurance or pay out of pocket if they get ill. So that's essentially the insurers and consumers, and the aim of the game is to maximize. They each get the same amount of money or wealth at the beginning of the game, and the aim is to maximize the dollars at the end of the round. So for customers, they can choose either to buy the insurance, in which case the amount of they would have to spend an amount on the premium, or if they get ill and they have to go and pay for health services out of pocket, they would have to pay various expenses, and that would reduce their wealth and what resources they have. Insurance is really about the net profit at the end. But what's really nice about the game is that there are different scenarios, and I'm just going to put this up. You don't try to read it all, but essentially it shows different scenarios where either the consumer, there might be asymmetric information, which is very often the case, where consumers, the insurers don't know the risk profile of the consumers, but you might have perfect information where the consumers must show the risk card. There are also things about pricing, where sometimes the insurers can charge any price they can, risk rate if they know the risk of the customer, or they might have to charge the same price, have community rating. So there are all these different scenarios, and there are various rounds of the game. And by the end of it, people have a very good understanding of all of these different insurance concepts, and yeah, and learn certain skills such as how to set an actuarially fair premium. So I would encourage you to have a look at the full video. The full details of the game are available in the handbook as well. Also, just to mention that Florian Buchner has developed an online version of the health insurance game with Jennifer. So, okay, now I'm going to switch over to just give you a little taste of what a role play exercise looks like. And this is one about revenue generation, mobilizing resources for healthcare in a low-income country. And it's quite straightforward. It just provides a bit of information about the country, the macroeconomic and health status of the country, a little bit about the health system, just in very broad terms, and then outlines some of the problems that the health system is facing. And essentially, students are provided with reading material that they do as background reading about different health financing mechanisms, and are then asked to consider what they would recommend in this country context in the form of a role play. So there are 5 different groups that are set up. Those are the different groups there. And obviously, the thing with role plays that is really very helpful is that you not only get to understand concepts and develop some critical thinking, but you get to really have a very good understanding of the perspectives of different stakeholders. And so then in the class, people, these different groups actually present their recommendations to the commission that the Ministry of Health has set up. All of these case studies are on the IHEA repository, so you can go and read them in more details later. Anyway, I've talked about that. I just wanted to mention a role play that isn't on in the repository, but is in the handbook, and it's another one that was developed by Florian Buchner. And this one is a very interesting one. He uses it as a semester long. It's like a course in itself. And it creates a context of a particular health system and the need to completely reorganize that health system after there's been some major transition or political transition. And different people have different roles, and they need to work together and barter and negotiate over the period of a whole semester about how to actually reorganize the health system. And as I said, it's very useful to get a detailed understanding of get a good understanding of different stakeholder perspectives, but also they're incredibly useful when you're dealing with large health policy kind of issues, rather than things around health service delivery. So I'm going to move on from role plays and just give a couple of examples of very useful short problem-solving exercises. And this one was developed by Heather Brown. Heather, who did the introduction. And you can see, and this is the full exercise. They can be very brief. And what I like about this one is that it demonstrates how you can make a short problem-solving exercise very relevant and very context relevant. So at the time when Heather wrote this, Jeremy Hunt, who's been in the press a lot recently, was the Secretary for State. So people could relate to that, and a little bit of spite. He's a can-do politician. And it helps one again deal with conceptual issues, but also problem solving. Think about how to do how to actually embed equity within a health system. And hopefully these are giving you some ideas of what you could develop. Now, I mean, this one probably wouldn't be, you couldn't use it just as it is because your context would be different. I mean, in the UK, there are the clinical commissioning groups, but in other countries, there are other stakeholders who are making the decisions. I wanted to show you another one, which is also problem solving, and it's actually an example of a case study, the type of case study that you see quite a lot of. One of the reasons I'm showing this is because it's got a very nice acknowledgement of the original source. So so this was done by Tracy Sapp at University of East Anglia, and she adapted a case study that was developed by somebody else. And so basically, it's the problem that we all have: limited resources and how to use those. So she paints a scenario where suddenly there will be £6,000 extra, and you've got to look at how that can be used. And so there's a detailed background about the options, and then these are summarized in this table. And essentially, the students need to work in a group and do some sums and work out exactly how they would suggest the £6,000 are used. This is an example. This could be used in this format, but you might want to actually use examples that might be more relevant. You know, if you in a low-income country, you might want to use examples around malaria and other examples. Okay, so moving on to the next one. I wanted to, this is also, there is a whole video of this in the YouTube channel. And this is a really nice one because often we don't think of using active learning and case studies for people to understand quite complex methodological concepts and actually how it works within the black box. So Michael shows this definition from a standard textbook about what probabilistic sensitivity analysis is. And lots of students, particularly if they don't have a very strong quantitative background, are just not gonna get it. So Michael developed quite a nice way of actually physically and getting people active about it. So he started off with just a very basic probabilistic flow. And then what he did was he took masking tape and actually mapped out the decision tree and how the probabilities would work on the floor. And the students had to actually walk around. And again, they used dice to decide who was going to have to move and what the probabilities were. And because your standard dice only has 6 sides, Michael suggested that you could use Dungeons and Dragons dice, which have a lot more options. But so that's an example of understanding methodological concepts and getting people to understand what happens inside the black box. This is now an example. Nancy Devlin has developed quite a few case studies, and this is one developed by Nancy, and I'll show you. And essentially what she does is it's to develop skills in using visual analog scales. And she hands out quite a detailed health questionnaire, the kind of questionnaire that you would use if you were trying to get health state valuations from a population. And she actually asks the students to fill in the questionnaire by themselves in the class. And I'm just showing you 3 of the pages of the questionnaire. Obviously, it's quite a lot more detailed. One of the reasons that I'm illustrating using this is that what is really helpful with case studies is, particularly if you're going to make them public domain or share them with your colleagues, is to develop an instructor guide or facilitator's notes, which explains sort of how long you might need for the case study, how you run it, you distribute the health questionnaire, you just ask the students to complete the questionnaire. When they've all completed it, you collect them all in, shuffle them all up, and then hand them around to other students. And then you work through a structured discussion. And Nancy provides some suggestions about what should be, what you could pick up on. And some of them are, how many dimensions are there in the descriptive system, to get them to understand how it's structured, to allow people to actually learn the coding process, but also to highlight some of the issues around using these kinds of tools and what's good practice and bad practice. So she points out that the states on page 5 and 6 don't seem to appear in any particular order of severity. That is, they're not ranked from the best to the worst, because they're descriptions of health states, and you've got to rate them. And she, with that discussion, explains that that's really good practice to avoid leading to biasing participants' response. She also deals with the issue of having a value for a dead state. So I won't talk about that much more, but basically that is a very useful one, and I think it could be used quite universally. This is another of Nancy Devlin's, and it's a very short one. So it's again just trying to show that some of them can be just really short. So it's really getting people to be able to calculate an incremental cost effectiveness ratio. And she gives them a graphing chart, a piece of paper, and just asks them to plot the ICEs on that. And essentially asks which test is the most cost effective, and then a discussion point. But so this is again just a very simple one where there's a bit of number crunching and discussion, but it's also to entrench concepts as well as develop some of the skills around doing calculations, etc. The last one that I'm going to just briefly go through is a number crunching exercise. Let me just make that a lot smaller. Around national health accounts, and it develops skill in how to actually do this and do some of the calculations, etc. And it provides all the information. If you were doing a national health account, you'd actually have to go out and collect all this data, but it's provided in the case study. But it's not completely straightforward. There's some little tricks in it, and it's to again get people to understand some of the concepts. So within national health accounts, you have funding sources, you have financing intermediaries, and you have providers. And there are different matrices that you can come up with. Now, some of the information is given as the source of funds, and you actually have to work out who is the financing intermediary, who's actually paying the provider. So as I say, all the information is provided, and this can be easily obtained from a national health accounts or health expenditure review that's being done in your country, and you can adapt this to your specific context. So all the information is given there, and then they ask to complete this matrix. So basically take all that information, work out which cell it goes in, and then have a bit of a discussion about that. So what does it say? What does it suggest about the structure of health services in the country? What's the distribution, etc., etc. And then this particular one has a second phase, which this is, you know, you can tell so much from financing and expenditure data, but you don't get a good enough understanding of the health system and some of the challenges, the efficiency and the equity challenges it can face. So this has a second part where there's further information provided, information on the distribution of healthcare professionals between the public and private sectors, between different levels of care. Also, some information on the cost per visit or at different levels of care for outpatient visits. Also information about geographic distribution in terms of, so it gives you some information about the different geographic areas, and as one expects, those that often have the highest poverty rates have the lowest per capita expenditure, etc. Anyway, some more discussion issues there. So I'm sorry that was a really whirlwind tour, but I hope that it's given you some exposure to different kinds of case studies, sparked some ideas about what you can include in case studies. And yeah, I'm going to hand back to Heather, and then look forward to discussion and more questions and yeah, engagement. So over to you, Heather.
Okay, thanks, Di. So here are just some suggestions for developing and using case studies. So you could possibly start by using existing case studies, such as those that are found on the AHEA repository. And as well, just as I mentioned earlier, make sure that if you use that you credit the original source. And it would be helpful that if you do adapt one, to also put on the repository, because that would be really useful for other people to see kind of how that you adapted it, and then to give people ideas of how they might further adapt it to their own context. And when you start developing case studies, it's good to start small when developing your own from scratch. So for example, the one that I developed that Di showed earlier, that was originally for a master's in public health, a health economics module. That was a 15-minute exercise after a lecture. So thinking about, you know, not having whole days, but maybe thinking about how you can do one small exercise, see how it goes, and then think about how you can expand upon it either the next year by making it bigger or changing it, getting feedback on what students think and how that then would influence what you do next. And then kind of thinking about these things from scratch, it does take a lot of time. So you have to think about how the exercise can meet the learning outcomes, as well as then, you know, after administering it, to see if it actually worked, to see if students felt like that they, after doing the exercise, they had a better understanding of the learning outcomes that you want them to, and then thinking about if they haven't, how you might want to tweak that going forward. And the other thing to keep in mind is that use your imagination, so come up with kind of unique or innovative ideas, but make sure it's grounded in reality. So thinking about the specific context. And I guess one of those things, again, thinking about the exercise that I did at the time, especially now in British politics, you have politicians coming and going so quickly, so that you might need to completely revise exercises if they are no longer current, and making sure that you keep on top of that. And as well, it's really helpful because you might not be teaching the module forever, and as well, that you want to share it with others, to develop facilitators' notes and to refine those over time, as I said, with after getting feedback from students, so that it's something that other people can use. And this also means that you kind of, on the day, you're not winging it, so you can see, you know, if you have a clear idea of what it's supposed to look like, then it makes it much easier to run, and you're more likely to go to the planned time than if you just kind of had this thing and see see how it goes, because it might take 15 minutes, might take 30 minutes, might take an hour, and that would impact on the whole running of the course for the day. And as well, if you have the possibility, it would be useful to try and pilot it with other staff members to see what they think and to get their feedback before you try it. And so for using case studies where it involves group work, that the facilitators should circulate among the groups, either virtually or in person, to check understanding and any queries. So it's really helpful that you just don't leave students on their own, that you go amongst the groups and make sure that everyone understands kind of the activity, and that everyone is participating and not just sitting staring at each other. And as well, it's good to have, if you're done in groups, to have everyone report back. And you can either think about doing that very formally, where you assign one person when you assign groups to report back, so you can give everyone roles, or you could do it informally, just ask people to do it, and make sure that, you know, kind of everyone has the opportunity to talk and participate. But that's kind of what you can do by when you go around the groups, to make sure that no one feels like they can't, you know, engage with the group. And it's important to summarize at the end, again, to reiterate what the learning outcomes were, why they did the activity, and to highlight key issues that arose, or even kind of if some specifically interesting things came up in the group, to highlight that and kind of how that will influence their learning going forward.
And that's it. Great. Heather, you muted at the moment.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, I saw those things in the chat because I was trying to monitor it, but then I realized it was just you putting up the YouTube stuff. So yes, I guess, does anyone have any questions or comments or thoughts?
Suggestions?
Suggestions.
Talk about case studies you've done. And are you willing to share them? So I've put into the chat box, somebody said the links to the games and role plays would be appreciated. So I put in the direct link to the repository, but also to the YouTube channel, so that everyone can look at those.
Hi, Rachel. Did you have a question?
I do, yes, because I am quite new to this game, and particularly the online asynchronous learning. And so thank you so much for sharing all these resources. They've been really helpful. The case studies were really useful. My question is, so we're doing a lot of online courses that are international in context. And do you have any advice in terms of making them international across different healthcare systems, and what might work better or worse with the international context?
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'll jump in, Heather. That's where it's quite interesting to look at Jennifer Con's insurance game, and that game has actually been played in a whole range of different country contexts, and really it's thinking about you know, the context that she gives is everything from a completely competitive free market for insurance to where there's a mandatory insurance and people actually have to buy and insurers have to insure and aren't necessarily so you can kind of look at the countries that you know where you have students from and ensure that the scenarios that you're using are helpful. Yeah, and it really is just looking at the case studies and saying, okay, does this resonate with the reality? And things like the low, that example of that case study in a low income country context, making sure that, and this is the slight, Heather mentioned it, it is a slight problem, is that quite often you should really update it quite frequently. So the low income country case study, the information that we gave about this, this country and their macroeconomic and the health status and that sort of thing, was actually taken from those were the averages for low income countries from World Bank data. So yeah, anyway, Heather, I'm sure you've got other things to suggest, but quite a lot of these cases are being put into computer format. That's why I mentioned Florian actually computerizing the insurance game, which is great for where you've got online courses and people from a range of different countries. Sorry, Heather.
No, I was just going to say, it also depends, because I guess once you know the students, and depends on your class size, that you can kind of, if you're making groups and doing it online, like if they're doing a kind of activity outside or using a forum discussion board, to kind of group people by types of countries. So you can say, you know, kind of in the module I'm running now, we'll say like in your country, and that there's groups that kind of, they all fit together. So there's a few people from the Middle East, a few people from kind of African countries, a few people from, you know, kind of UK, US, and then thinking about how then if you split up the groups to make sure that people are within a context that they understand within the groups, and you keep the question quite broad to say like in your context, in your country, and that seems to go down okay. Delia?
That was really useful. Thank you so much. I'm in Australia, that's why it's nighttime here at the moment. Yeah. Just in terms of just any advice for, because we have both an internal and external units, and just any advice. I mean, I can see for the internal units it's just fantastic because you're there and you can circulate as you suggested and everything like that. But in terms of the online asynchronous units, any advice on how to manage case studies for that group of students?
Well, I guess it depends on how you use it. So if where they're doing group work is, say, you know, in a discussion forum, then kind of, you know, checking in and posting, you know, kind of comment saying, okay, you know, because you can see then who's in the group, who's participating, and you can just say, have you thought about this? Or good, you know, kind of thing saying, or, you know, trying to draw people in if they're not kind of fully participating is how I would say it. And then, you know, if you're running kind of an online webinar or some kind of lecture, then circulating through the group still when they have breakout rooms, and just doing it as you would kind of in person.
Okay, look, thanks very much. Yeah, it's so much easier like in the internal classes when you're there and you can interact so easily, and I just find it a little bit less easy in the online courses, yeah, or units, yeah. But thanks very much.
Nancy?
Yes, thank you, Heather, and thank you, Di, very much for the case studies. Helpful. I was wondering though, all insurance based in the United States, you might be able to tell from my accent, and which is probably the insurance based healthcare. But are there? Do you have any case studies about developing a national health program? Or, you know, we've been struggling in the United States, or some of us have, to get a national health program, something like Medicare for all, or national health system of some sort. So that seemed to be missing from the case studies, and I just like your comment on that. Thank you.
We just showed a couple of case studies, and so there are others out there. There's one that I developed that I haven't put online yet because they are a little bit out of date. But essentially, it's a group of 8 country profiles, so very short 5-page documents which explain around the health system and different ones, and then uses the Katzen framework to allow people to analyze it, etc. They're not that many case studies on how to move from more of a kind of competitive insurance and more of a sort of so-called voluntary to a universal mandatory system. But we also hoping that some of the people who are participating here might actually be developing some case studies, might be inspired to develop some case studies, and that the repository over time, and are willing to share them. And so that over time, we actually will have a really amazing collection that cover a whole range of issues, a whole range of different contexts, in a whole range of different languages. Heather?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying, if you do develop anything, then please share it. Linda?
Oh, I don't think my camera's working very well. Hello. Hi, thank you so much, Heather and Di. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. That was great. And I managed to convince my business unit to buy the Teaching Health Economics book. So that's also quite good, but I'm slowly working through it. My challenge, and would be grateful for advice, is the health economics input that I'll be doing is on a Masters of Public Health course. So the people that are coming are not always that keen, but also generally have got no background whatsoever in anything to do with economics. So it's quite scary for them, to be fair. But the other issue that may be the same as sort of Rachel and others have sort of alluded to is because of the uptick in numbers, shall we call it, during the pandemic, everything pivoted online, and now we have 500 people, which is slightly alarming. And I'm going to end up with 500 who will receive a sort of short input about health economics, and another 120 or so who'll get a more of a module-based input, because anyway, that's how it's going to work. So I'm trying to think through what are the pros and cons and where's the starting point for me, because I'm a bit new to this. So any advice would be gratefully received, but thank you so much for everything so far.
I would say, well, Di has opened the repository.
Maybe
so
if what I wanted to just point out is go to the repository, because there's also lecture presentations and PowerPoint slides, and you'll find a whole range of ones, but there's a series by Richard Smith, which he was doing with non-economists. And some of that gives really nice examples of how to explain the concepts, you know, in a very accessible way. Yeah, and anyway, so that was all I was going to say. And we're trying to build up the repository and refine the way in which the things are categorized, so that in future we might also have a category which indicates you know, the background of the student, if they're public health and they're non-economists.
Yeah,
these ones are particularly good.
Yeah, I did thank you, and I've had a quick look through some of those, because I think maybe it's my bad random selection. I kind of thought it's a bit hefty for what they need, but yeah, maybe a wee category to even flag the types of students would be excellent. No, that I think the repository is great, and anyone else in the call that's not had a look at it, I highly recommend it as well. The other thing, if I can be cheeky and have a second question, was I'm really interested in then maybe trying to contribute to any literature there is on that kind of pedagogy of teaching health economics. And again, bit on the new and green end of these things, but is there any particular sort of target journals for that kind of thing, even from just for the rest of us here who are new to teaching and learning and really want to understand, but within the discipline of health economics, you know, what we should be sort of thinking about and paying attention to?
I guess we did have the recording should still be available, I assume. in May, we had David McCausland, who's based at University of Aberdeen, and he is the editor for, I can't remember the name of the journal.
Yeah, it's a review of economics or something. Yeah.
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 So that would be something, because he said that they did, would be interested in health economics as part of economics. We have as well, a few years ago, it's depending on what you want to do. We did publish something in health economics, note to the editor. So, depending on kind of how you're placing it, that, health economics as well might be something. But there are a few economics education journals as well. So I would suggest
Super,
looking
thanks.
at all of them.
But also, just to pass the baton back to Linda, it might be, if people would like to volunteer to have a webinar discussion around kind of, okay, what are the most important health economics things to teach to public health? These are my initial ideas. This is what I came up with. What do other people think? I mean, we really want to encourage discussions like that, and we're looking at ways in which, particularly low and middle income countries, which don't have much health economics teaching, of actually working with colleagues who wanting to start new courses and get them to have those kinds of discussions and draw on module outlines from a range of different countries and institutions, and critically look at those and say, is this appropriate within our context? Is it the most important? If we've got limited time, actually, yeah. So anyone, please feel free to volunteer to
Yeah, I accept your baton, but only with the community help. Yeah, I'd be interested in that. I mean, one of the things that, because I've just become a new lecturer at our university, I'm going to do this postgraduate certificate in academic practice. Sounds super fun. But it's made me actually take a step back and look and think, even the 500 students, 98% of them are from other countries than the UK or Scotland, as you can hear from my accent. So, just looking again critically at what we've been offering and saying, well, how much of the core concepts do they need, and how to then present it in a way that, as you said, there was something you sort of mentioned, Di, about people understanding it in their context, which I thought, yeah, that's possibly what's also missing at the moment as well. So I'm going to go have a look at that. So anyone can contact me. I'm Glasgow Caledonian University.
Is there anyone else who has any questions or comments? No? Okay, so shall we wrap it up then and give everyone an extra 6 minutes?
Hello, I just wanted to say a quick hello to Professor McIntyre. She knows me from many years ago. My name is Charlotte Mohechi. We go way back.
Hi, Charlotte.
Professor McIntyre. Hi.
You
Nice
might have
to
noticed
see
that
you.
one of the case studies was one of the ones we developed together, the National Health Accounts one. So you actually were present in the presentation.
Yes, I was, and I am a firm believer in case studies and role plays, and I attest to the fact that they do help students to understand the concepts better, but also to have some kind of hands-on experience as they sort of work through the concepts of what has been taught in the theoretical classes. So thank you very much, Di, and I hope to continue dialoguing with you at some point.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Charlotte. And thank you, everyone. And this recording will be available if anyone wants to go back and look at anything. And as said, please contribute to the repository. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.